Hi everyone, Professor King here. In this video, I will be discussing Angela Davis's essay, The Meaning of Freedom, technically a speech, but it's in documented written form, so we'll call it an essay for all intents and purposes. This is going to be a relatively short video, so I'll take it to the share screen in just a moment. But again, I always want to remind you of a few things. One, if you have any questions, please feel free to Zoom, Pronto, email, Canvas message me, however best you get a hold of me, Instagram, whatever. The other thing is, remember that as you are reading, you should be actively reading. So you should be highlighting passages that stick out to you for whatever reason. They're important, you agree with them, you disagree with them, you have a question about them, you want to come back to them for further consideration, et cetera, et cetera. You should also be boxing words or phrases that are unfamiliar to you, looking them up, what they mean, and then rereading them back in context. So make sure that you're doing that because these readings can be challenging. We're not used to always reading this sort of scholarly academic form of language. And we have to get used to that form of language so that we can engage in these conversations. Again, it's not about whether we agree with the political bent of the person who is writing or speaking. It's about making sure that we understand what they're saying. And so that if we do agree, if we do disagree, if we do land somewhere on that spectrum, that we can agree or disagree or whatever at the same level of scholarly engagement. So that, have you ever heard the phrase like punching up or punching down? So that we're not trying to punch too far up, so that we look like we are formidable opponents with these speakers with whom now we are engaging in conversation. Because again, these conversations are these eternal historical conversations that have been going on for millennia in one way or another. And now we are part of them. We are living history. And that is so cool. But it only becomes really cool if we know what the heck we're talking about. And if we don't, we very quickly get sort of, marginalized, I guess I will say, for lack of a better term, from those communities. And so it's important that we can speak in the scholarly language of the writers and speakers whom we're addressing. Again, we don't have to agree with them. That's not the point of this. If that were, the sort of far right's worst fear come true, that college is indoctrination, then yeah, I would want you to just agree with everything I say. But I got to tell you, some of the most boring essays I read are people telling me what they think I want to hear. So I can only speak for myself, but I know that this is not indoctrination. This is the exact opposite. I want you to home in on the things that you perhaps love, the things that you hate, the things that you want to grapple with. I don't want this to be the banking model of education where I say, you believe this, and you go, yes, I believe this, right? That is the antithesis of critical thought. And so if you had any questions or worries about if that's what I was expecting of you, I know we're like already, 2/3 of the way through the semester. That's not what I'm expecting of you. Because on the same token, some of the best essays I've ever read are people whose views are 180 degrees opposite mine. And it's not because they convinced me to agree with them. No, I am, I'm old. I'm stuck in my ways at this point. But they were capable of having me see something that I otherwise think is anathema to me in a way where I could say, cool, okay, I can see how someone could think that way, right? And that's the end goal of argument, is that sort of mutual understanding. Yes, perhaps sometimes there's compromise if action is involved, but mutual understanding, stasis, that's what we're looking for. Not winning or losing, not, blame and culpability, but real understanding. Even if we still disagree. Disagreeing is totally fine. The positive vibes crowd, I'm sorry, but that is, you know, that is that's a hawk of you know what. We should be able to express a whole rainbow of opinions, of emotions, of skepticism, of a curmudgeon curmudgeon attitude if we want to, as long as we're respectful, right? So I just want to reiterate all those things, because sometimes when we do get to this point in the semester, we tend to forget and we're just sort of treading water. So we're like, whatever you want, Professor King, just tell me. And I'm like, no, I want you to be you. And I want you to really, you know, if we're going to extend that metaphor, I want you to really swim those waves. And I want you to flourish as yourself, right? Emerge victorious in a way that is authentic to you. So that being said, blah, 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 right? I always have to go off on my long windbag discussions. Let me, what am I doing? Oh yeah, I'm going to take it to a share screen and we're going to talk Davis. We're going to talk Davis. So this is Angela Davis. This is The Meaning of Freedom. This is a speech that she gave that was later transcribed into this essay format. That's why at the end you see those Q&As. Those were literally like audience members of hers asking her questions about X, Y, and Z. It's a few years old, right? If you notice, there's a different president where a few presidents passed when she's talking about, but again, still very relevant, still very current to what's being discussed today in terms of race, law, the prison system, incarceration, justice, politics, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So again, these questions are going to be helpful either reading them beforehand and sort of thinking about how you would answer them once you finish the whole piece, right? Not doing the sort of fishing for a line thing where you think you found a quote that answers the question. Oops. I want you to be able to really digest all of Davis and answer these questions in complex and nuanced and thorough ways. So here's the questions. First off, according to Davis, who is not free? And there's more than one group. So again, a lot of times when we do those fishing expeditions for here's the line, she says it's this person. We're not reading the whole thing. So we have a malformed or a not fully formed answer. In this case, Davis talks about several groups who aren't free, not just one. So be able to name several groups. She also says that slavery and incarceration signify, quote, social death and civil death. That's why you have to box unfamiliar words or phrases and read them and try to understand what they mean and reread them in context. Because if you just do that old model context clues thing where you try to assume what the word means, we all know what happens when we assume. You make an ass out of you and me if you didn't know the answer to that. So don't do that, right? Read in context when it's unfamiliar, or I'm sorry, box it, look it up, reread it in context when it's unfamiliar. What are the connections then between slavery and incarceration? So this kind of dovetails, piggybacks on the last question. What are the connections between racism, incarceration, and corporate globalization and privatization? And again, if you don't know exactly what corporate globalization or privatization mean, look them up. Don't rely on assuming at this point. We are no longer in middle school and high school. You have to be able to grapple with challenging texts by doing the work to understand their meaning. A lot of people ask me, like, how do I write better? How do I use smarter words in my writing? You increase your vocabulary by every time you encounter a word that you don't understand, you look it up and you understand it. If you've ever read the autobiography of Malcolm X, that's exactly what he did when he was in prison. He went through the whole dictionary and every single word he didn't understand, he forced himself to memorize the entire dictionary. And he read and he read and he read. He was not Malcolm X when he went into prison, right? I mean, he was the person, but the polish and the efficacy and the political nuance and all the things that he had when he came out were a result of, guess what? Reading, right? And reading is the number one way that we become part of these scholarly communities, these scholarly conversations. Because otherwise, again, we're punching up, right? We're punching above our weight class. We're trying to achieve something that we're not quite ready for. And the way we get ready for it is by challenging ourselves to learn new words, to learn new ideas, to learn new perspectives that we don't necessarily encounter in mainstream media. All right, what do you think of or make of her concluding paragraphs, and what are your thoughts? So that requires, right, again, this is not the cherry picking model of education where you say, oh, I grabbed this cherry off the tree. Or, I'm sorry, it's an apple. That's an apple. A cherry would be like this. I grabbed this apple off the tree. It's an apple. I know it's an apple. It's an apple, right? You got to do something with that apple. You got to make apple pie. You got to make a fritter, right? You got to do something with it to make it yours. Because until you do something with that information, it's not your idea. If you just read Davis and say, I understand, so I agree, that's that indoctrination we're talking about, right? There's no critical engagement there. So we have to go the next step, which is, yes, I understand what she's saying. And now I got to slow down. I got to take a step back. I got to really think. I got to really think about what she's saying. And what do I think about it? How do I feel about it? Do I agree with all of it? Because that's very unlikely. The people who I love the most in this world, I don't agree with everything they think, feel, or believe. And there are people who, again, their ideas are totally anathema to me. But I'm like, oh yeah, I can see that, right? It's very rare that we fully 100% agree with any concept or idea, or fully 100% disagree. So be nuanced, have complexity in your response. Next question, what connections can you make between this reading and say Ava DuVernay's film 13th or Michelle Alexander's The New Jim Crow? Maybe make a little Venn diagram and see where they connect and where they have differences. It doesn't mean differences doesn't necessarily mean they disagree, but it could mean that they're coming from a different perspective, right? Maybe one is talking about the prison industrial complex from a historical viewpoint. Maybe one is talking about a specific aspect of the prison industrial complex. Maybe one talks about these groups, but not those groups. Maybe one has this solution and another one has this solution. So again, it's not necessarily where they disagree. It's just where what one covers versus what the other covers, where that Venn diagram overlaps and where it diverges. And then because we are still in the process of building our skills of analysis, right? That's this whole dang class. What's the so what for you? In other words, if Davis is arguing X and she's using whatever evidence to support her argument of X, then when you look at the purpose of why she's telling you all this, what is it? See, Lionel gets it. Just kidding, it's the mailman. Lionel, relax. He listens so well. What's the so what for you? Okay. Because there's always a so what for the audience. And if we're not clarifying that, then why the heck are we talking to other people in the first place? Why are we writing to other people in the first place if we're not trying to make them think, feel, see, believe something, right? So what's the so what for you? All right, I'm going to take it off the share screen. Hopefully Lionel is done with his barking. I think so. As always, if you have questions, Canvas message, email, Zoom, Pronto, Instagram, whatever works best for you. I hope you all have a great rest of your day. I know I will. And I will see you all around in Sea Bear Spas. All right, bye.